Orin Vassal stood at the speaker's podium in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and watched the number sit there like a stone at the bottom of a well. Around him, on 9 elevated platforms arranged in a ring, representatives of 9 species looked down at him. Some were unreadable. Some were not even trying to hide what they felt. He had been in this chamber many times. He had argued, negotiated, compromised, and argued again. He had spent 7 years of his life inside the corridors and meeting rooms of Nexara Station, eating bad food in small offices, learning the names of every aide and assistant to every council member, because names mattered and details mattered, and the small things were sometimes the only things you actually controlled. The peace treaty he had drafted was 240 pages long. He had read every word of it more than once. He had written most of it himself. It was supposed to protect 3 colony worlds from being absorbed into the Dominion bloc. 2 human worlds, 1 Tarathi, small places, farming communities, settlements that had been building themselves up quietly for 2 generations, not bothering anyone. The Dominion bloc wanted them because they sat on a shipping corridor that would cut travel time between 2 of the bloc's major systems by 11 days. 11 days. That was the price of 3 worlds full of people. Orin had thought he had the votes. He had spent 2 years making sure he had the votes. Councillor Peth of the Vorandi had promised him personally, in a private meeting with no aides present, that the Vorandi seat would support the treaty. Peth had eaten food from Orin's homeworld that day as a gesture of friendship. They had talked for 3 hours. Peth abstained. So did the Sarathi delegate. So did the 2 independent seats. The 5th vote that was supposed to support him switched entirely to the bloc side at the last moment, without explanation or warning. The treaty failed. Then, before Orin could process what had happened, the chamber moved immediately to the next item on the agenda, the Dominion Annexation Clause. It passed in under 4 minutes, 30 standard days. That was what the 3 colony worlds now had. Council security was at his side before he had moved. They were not rough about it. They were polite. That almost made it worse. His access code stopped working before he reached the corridor outside the chamber doors. He stood there for a moment in the wide, amber-lit hallway with its curved dark walls and its distant hum of station systems, holding a data tablet that now connected to nothing. And he tried to decide what a person did next when 7 years of careful work was ended in 4 minutes by people who had smiled at him across tables and accepted his hospitality and given their word. He did not hear Sova come up beside him. She was easy to miss. She was short, very old, wrapped in layers of dark cloth with thin silver patterns along the hem. Her people, the Tarathi, aged differently than humans. She could have been 100 years old or 200. Her eyes were large and dark, and they held, at this moment, no surprise at all. She had been watching the vote from the observation gallery. He had seen her up there before it started. He had not thought much of it. She spoke quietly. Her translator rendered her words in flat, even tones. She said she had known this would happen. Orin looked at her. He asked her why she had not told him. She said because knowing it would happen was not the same as being able to stop it, and she had needed him to go through the process first. She had needed the betrayal to be on record. She had needed him to be the person who tried every correct thing and was failed by the system. That mattered. For what came next, it mattered. He asked what came next. She reached into the folds of her clothing and took out a small data chip. It was plain, no markings. She held it out to him between 2 thin fingers. He took it. She told him the chip had coordinates and 1 word. She told him to find the person at those coordinates and to tell them what happened here today. She told him not to explain, not to argue, not to ask for anything. Just tell them what happened. She told him the word on the chip would explain who he was looking for. Then she turned and walked back toward the observation gallery entrance, leaning on her staff, unhurried, as though she had simply delivered a message she had been carrying for a very long time and was glad to be done with it. Oren looked at the chip in his hand. He found a public terminal 2 corridors away that was not linked to his revoked codes. He slotted the chip in. The coordinates were at the far edge of charted space, past the rim boundary markers. A moon, no name, no registration, nothing in any database he could reach. The word was Baba. He stood there in the corridor for a long moment. Station life moved around him. Aliens and humans and cargo loaders and service drones, all of it continuing as though 3 worlds had not just been handed away in 4 minutes. Then he pocketed the chip and went to find someone who might know what that word meant. Dara Novik's office smelled like machine oil and old paper, which was fitting because Dara herself seemed like something that had been built a long time ago and kept running through sheer stubbornness. She was 58 years old and looked like someone who had decided she was done being diplomatic about things. Short silver-streaked hair, always pulled back, a gray work jacket that had never seen an iron, eyes that processed information like a scanner processed cargo manifests, quickly and without sentiment. She had worked intelligence for the Earth Diplomatic Corps for 22 years. Then she had stopped, abruptly, for reasons no one explained. Now she ran a small shipping logistics company on the lower decks of Nexara Station. Oren had known her for 6 years. He trusted her completely, which was not something he said lightly. He found her at her desk, surrounded by screens and a half-eaten meal she had clearly forgotten about. He put the data chip on the desk in front of her without saying anything. She looked at it, then she looked at him, then she looked at the chip again. She did not touch it right away. She asked him where he got it. He told her. He told her everything, starting from the vote and going all the way to Sova handing it to him in the corridor. He kept it brief. Dara did not like long stories. She liked facts arranged in order. When he finished, she picked up the chip carefully, the way a person picks up something they are not sure about, and slotted it into her desk terminal. She read the coordinates, she read the word. Then she put the chip down on the desk and sat very still for a moment, not thinking. She was already past thinking. She was deciding how much to say. She told him that the name Baba Yaga was not in any public record. It was not in the standard council archives. It was not in the Earth Diplomatic Database or the open intelligence files. If you searched for it in the normal places, you would find old folklore from a human culture called Slavic, a story about a witch who lived in a house in the woods, and nothing else. But Dara had not worked normal places for most of her career. She told him there were 3 classified files held by the Galactic Council Intelligence Division. All 3 were about the same person. All 3 were flagged with a multi-species warning notation that translated, roughly, as, "Do not approach without cause, do not engage without authorization, do not provoke under any circumstances." Oren asked what the files said about her. Dara said she had only ever seen the outside of 2 of them. The third she had not even been cleared to know existed until a contact told her, in a bar, in a whisper, that it was there. What she knew came from pieces. From stories that moved through intelligence channels the way rumors move through any closed community, which was quickly and with a lot of distortion, but usually with a seed of something real at the center. The woman at those coordinates was human, very old. She had been part of the first generation of deep space explorers, the ones who went out past the rim before the Council had finished mapping it, before there were treaties and corridors and approved routes. She had gone out and something had happened to her, and she had come back different. Nobody agreed on the something. That was the part that had been distorted the most. What everyone agreed on was what came after. Dara told him about the Brethosi Compact. 20 years ago, the Compact sent 7 mining vessels to strip a world on the edge of human-claimed space. None came back. No wreckage. No signals. 7 ships gone in a single night. The Compact filed a complaint. The council investigated and found nothing. The compact withdrew their claims 6 weeks later without explanation. The file was sealed. There was a rumor. There was always a rumor in these situations. The rumor said that the compact leadership had received a message, not official, no sender code, just a message that explained briefly and without hostility that the world was under human protection and would remain so, and that the next time a claim was filed against protected space, the response would be less polite. The rumor had a name attached to it, an old name from old human stories. Oren looked at the chip on the desk. He asked Dara what she thought he should do. She told him that was not a question she was going to answer for him. He asked her what she would do. She was quiet for a moment, then she said she would go. He booked passage on the next outbound freighter that night. It was a small cargo ship heading to a fuel depot 2 systems past the rim boundary. The pilot, a quiet Sarathi who asked no questions, agreed to drop him at the coordinates for a sum that was more than fair. Oren sat in the cargo hold for most of the journey and thought about 7 ships that had disappeared without a trace, and a woman who had come back from the deep dark, a different person than she had left. He thought about 3 worlds with 30 days left. He watched the stars outside the small porthole go strange as they crossed the rim boundary, where the charted space ended and the rest of it began. The freighter pilot did not ask questions. That was fine. Oren did not have answers he wanted to give. What he noticed was that the closer they got to the coordinates, the quieter the pilot became. Not a nervous quiet, more like the quiet of a person who had decided to look straight ahead and not think too hard about where they were going. When they reached the drop point, a dim amber star with a handful of cold moons circling it, the pilot lowered the ship to the surface of the smallest moon, held it there just long enough for Oren to step out with his bag, and then lifted again without a word. Oren stood on the surface and watched the freighter's engine lights disappear into the dark. The moon was not what he had expected. He had expected nothing. What he found was close to nothing, but with something in the middle of it. The structure sat about 200 meters from where he landed. It looked like it had started as a single prefab shelter, the kind that deep space survey teams used, and then been added to again and again over many years. Extra rooms bolted on the sides, reinforced panels over the original walls, a long, low extension at the back that looked like a workshop, tools hanging on hooks outside the main door, organized by size. A garden growing under a portable light dome, small and tidy, with plants he did not recognize mixed in with ones he did. And from a pipe on the roof, a thin line of smoke rising into the thin, pale sky. Someone lived here, had lived here for a very long time. He walked to the door, he knocked. Nothing happened for a moment, then the door opened. The woman standing in the doorway was not what he had imagined. He was not sure what he had imagined exactly, but it was probably something more dramatic. What he got was a compact, gray-haired woman in a dark work tunic and thick trousers, with strong hands and a face that had been weathered by a great many years into something sharp and still. Her eyes were brown and very clear, and she looked at him the way a person looks at something they were expecting to arrive. She said his name. He had not introduced himself. He had not spoken at all. He asked her how she knew. She told him she had a relay system that covered most of the approaches to this moon. She had been watching him since the freighter dropped him. She had run his face against a database she maintained herself. She knew who he was, where he worked, and roughly why he was here. She told him her name was Nadia. She said she had not been called the other name in a long time, and she preferred it stayed that way. She stood back from the door and told him to come in. The inside of the house was warm, warmer than he expected. The walls were covered in things: charts, tools, screens showing quiet data feeds, shelves of components and small mechanical objects, and here and there, a few things that were clearly just kept because they mattered to her. A folded piece of fabric, a small carved figure, a row of old photographs printed on actual paper, which was rare enough that he noticed it. She poured water into a small pot and set it to heat. She sat down across from him at a table that had been repaired so many times it looked like it was made of several different tables. She told him to tell her what happened, not because she did not know. She had been watching the council vote feed for days, but she wanted to hear how he told it. He told her all of it: the 7 years, the vote, the 4 abstentions, Peth eating food from his homeworld and then voting against everything they had discussed, the access codes going dark before he reached the corridor. She listened without interrupting. She did not make sounds of sympathy or outrage. She just listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. The water began to steam. Then she asked him one question. She asked whether the people on those 3 colony worlds were names in a file, or people he actually knew. He thought about it for a moment, not to decide what to say, to decide how to say it honestly. He told her about the Tarathi family he had visited during negotiations in the 2nd year, a grandmother who ran a small weaving workshop, 2 grandchildren, young, maybe 8 and 10 years old. At the end of his visit, they had given him drawings they made themselves. He still had them. One was a picture of him standing very tall and stiff, which he suspected was accurate. The other was a picture of their house with a bright yellow sun overhead, which was odd because their world had 2 suns, both pale blue. He had never asked what the yellow one meant. Nadia looked at him for a moment after he finished. Then she picked up her cup and held it with both hands and looked at the table. She told him she would need 3 days to prepare. He asked her what she needed him to do. She told him to stay out of the workshop, eat whatever he found in the kitchen, and get some sleep because he looked like he had not slept in several days. She was not wrong. Nadia did not sleep the first night. Oren knew this because he woke up at what his body told him was somewhere around the 3rd hour of dark, and the workshop at the back of the house was lit. He could see the glow under the connecting door. He could hear the quiet sounds of tools and components being moved, checked, assembled. Small sounds, patient sounds. The sounds of someone who had done this kind of work so many times that it no longer required any drama. He went back to sleep. The 2nd day, he stayed mostly in the main room. He ate what he found in the kitchen, which was simple but good. He tried to make himself useful once, offering to carry a crate of components from a storage shelf to the workshop door. Nadia accepted this without comment, which he took as permission to do it again when needed and not otherwise. He watched her work when the workshop door was open. Most of what he saw he understood in a general way: power cells, signal equipment, relay hardware, the kind of things a person used to maintain a private communications network at the edge of known space. But there were other things on the benches that he did not have names for, devices that had clearly been built from scratch, not assembled from purchased parts. Devices that had the look of something designed for a very specific purpose, by someone who understood that purpose completely. He did not ask about them. He got the sense that asking would not have been wrong, exactly. She would have answered, but that she preferred to let the work be the work without having to explain it. On the 2nd night, she came into the main room and sat down and drank water, and he asked her the question he had been holding since the freighter. He asked her what happened out on the rim all those years ago, what changed her. She was quiet for a while, not reluctant, more like she was deciding the shortest honest version. She told him she had been part of a 6-person survey team. They had gone farther out than any approved route, which was not unusual for those early years. The rules about approved routes existed mostly on paper back then. They found something. She did not say what. She said it did not matter what exactly. What mattered was what it showed her about what a human being could become under certain conditions, with no one watching. She said there were 2 directions a person could go after seeing that. She said she chose the direction that looked after people. Oren thought about that for a while. Then he asked her something else. He asked her why the Council was so afraid of humans, not human weapons or human fleets. Those existed, and the Council knew about them and worked around them like any other military equation. He meant the other kind of afraid. The kind where 3 classified files get written about a single woman living alone on a moon at the edge of the map. Nadia looked at him for a moment, and then said something that stayed with him for a long time after. She said the Council species had all evolved in stable environments. Their home worlds were old, settled, predictable. Their biology was built for consistency. When conditions changed too far outside the expected range, they struggled. They needed time to adjust. They built systems and structures and procedures to keep the world predictable enough for them to function well. Humans came from a world that had never stopped changing. Ice ages, floods, drought, diseases. Every generation had faced conditions that the previous one had not prepared them for. The result was a species that did not just tolerate disruption. They found ways through it. Sometimes the ways were not good, but they found them, every time. The Dominion bloc had made a very simple error. They controlled the political system. They assumed that meant they controlled the outcome. They had looked at Oren Vassal standing in that chamber with his treaty and his votes, and they had pulled the floor out from under him and assumed that was the end of it. They forgot what a human did when the floor was gone. Nadia stood up and went back to the workshop. On the 3rd morning, he woke to find her at the kitchen table with a small bag already packed beside her chair. She looked the same as she always looked, rested, still, like a person who had decided something a long time ago and did not need to keep deciding it. She told him her ship was fueled in the bay under the house. She told him to stay on the moon until she sent word, not as a question. He started to say something. She looked at him with those brown eyes, and the sentence did not quite make it out. He nodded. She picked up the bag. She stopped at the door. Without turning around, she told him that the drawings the children made, the ones the Tarathi children gave him, were worth keeping. She said children drew yellow suns on worlds with pale blue ones because yellow was the color of something warm and safe that they had seen in pictures. It was the color of hope to them, borrowed from a world they had never visited. Then she went out. He heard the bay doors below the house open and close. Then silence. What happened over the next 11 hours was not recorded anywhere in full. Pieces of it appeared later, in internal documents that were not meant to be shared, in conversations between officers who trusted each other completely and were still careful about what they said. A block intelligence analyst filed a report that was classified so quickly after submission that 3 people who had already read it were told they had not read it. 2 of them accepted this. 1 of them did not sleep well for the rest of the year. What was known, assembled from those pieces. The 3 most powerful command networks of the Dominion bloc experienced simultaneous and precise failures beginning at the same moment. Not explosions, not attacks in any way that the bloc's defense systems could identify or respond to. Every military asset that had been flagged for deployment to the 3 colony worlds simply went dark. The orders existed. The authorization codes were valid. The ships were ready. But the channels through which the orders would travel were gone. Not jammed. Not blocked. Removed carefully, like a skilled hand reaching into a machine and lifting out exactly the parts that made it do the one specific thing it was about to do, leaving everything else intact. The block's technical team spent 6 hours trying to restore the networks. They made no progress. At the end of the 6th hour, the networks came back on by themselves. Everything worked except the deployment pathways, which remained unavailable for reasons that no one could identify or explain. Aboard the flagship of Admiral Tev Oran, the situation was different. Tev Oran was a large alien, gray-blue scaled, not given to visible emotion in front of his crew. He had held command for 19 years. He was the kind of officer who made other officers stand straighter just by being in the room. At the 4th hour of the network failure, every screen in the command center went dark simultaneously. Then they all came back on, all of them, showing the same image. A small house on a rocky moon, stone and metal additions built on over years, tools on hooks by the door, a garden under a light dome, smoke from a chimney, the dim amber light of a distant star. It held on every screen for 47 seconds. Then it cleared. The screens returned to normal. The ship system showed no record of the interruption. Tev Oren sat in his command chair and did not speak for a long time. His crew watched him and did not speak either. He dismissed them to their stations. He sat alone. He had been a child when the Brethosi Compact lost 7 ships. He remembered the way the adults around him had talked about it in low voices, the particular tone that meant something had happened that nobody fully understood and nobody wanted to look at too closely. He had been young enough that the story had shaped him the way early stories did, sitting in the back of the mind and casting shadows on things later. He understood now what the image meant. At Nixara Station, Counselor Brath of the Dominion Block received a private message on a channel that should not have existed. He was alone in his office when it arrived. He read it twice. It was short. It told him that the annexation of the 3 colony worlds would not happen. It told him this was not a negotiation or a request. It told him that at the next full council session, he would propose a new protected world framework covering the 3 worlds, and he would do so as though the idea had come from him, because it was important for the council's stability that the idea appear to come from within the system rather than outside it. It told him that if the protected status was not in place within 15 standard days, a second contact would occur, and the second contact would not be focused on infrastructure. The message was not signed. Brath sat in his office for a long time. He was a practical creature. He had not reached his position through sentiment. He had reached it through a very clear understanding of which situations could be managed and which could not. He began drafting a proposal for a new protected world framework. Among the 4 council members who had abstained on Oren's vote, 3 sent urgent coded communications to their home governments within hours of each other. The content of those messages was not known, but the response from all 3 governments was the same: stand by for guidance, do nothing that draws attention. The 4th, Councillor Peth of the Vorandi, who had eaten food from Oren's homeworld and given his word and then abstained, resigned his council seat 4 days later. His resignation letter cited personal reasons. He returned to the Vorandi home system and, by all accounts, did not discuss Nexara or the council or anything related to either for the rest of his life. In the small house on the rocky moon, the lights in the workshop stayed off. The garden under the dome continued to grow in its quiet way. The smoke from the chimney rose into the amber sky, thin and steady, like a line drawn between the ground and everything above it. The transmission came on the 5th day. 2 sentences, text only, no voice. It is handled, you can go home now. Oren read it 3 times. He sat with it for a while in the main room of the house on the moon, with the warm light and the repaired furniture and the photographs on the wall that had never been explained to him. Then he put his bag together, called for a pickup on a public freight channel, and waited. He did not go home. He went back to Nixara. He walked through the station corridors with his revoked access codes still showing on his badge, because no one had yet bothered to update the physical record, which told him something about how seriously they had expected him to come back. He went to the council offices. He sat down in the outer waiting room of the administrative bureau and told the assistant there that he was available to resume his seat as the human diplomatic representative whenever the correct paperwork was processed. The assistant looked at him for a long moment, then went to find a supervisor. It took 4 days for the paperwork. He did not mind. He had nowhere else to be. On the 9th day after Nadia had left the moon, Councillor Brath of the Dominion Block stood up in a full council session and proposed, in a flat and careful voice, a new protected world framework. He spoke for 11 minutes. He used words like stability and mutual benefit and long-term security. He did not look at Oren. He did not look at the human seat at all. The proposal passed, 12 votes in favor, 2 abstentions, 0 against. The 3 colony worlds were placed under protected status. 30-day clock ended, permanently. Sova found Oren in the corridor afterward. She had been in the observation gallery again. She moved beside him without announcing herself in that quiet way of hers, and she walked with him for a moment before she said anything. She did not ask what had happened. She did not ask about Nadia or the moon or any of it. She looked at him with those large, dark eyes that never seemed to register surprise, and she nodded once slowly, the way a person nods when something they have been waiting a long time to see has finally come to pass. Then she turned and walked away. Oren sent a message to the Tarathi family that evening, the grandmother and the 2 grandchildren with their drawings. He kept it short. He told them their world was safe. He told them they could stay. He got a response 3 days later. It was mostly written by the children, he could tell, because it was enthusiastic in all the ways children were enthusiastic and not at all concerned with formal phrasing. They told him they were glad. They told him they had drawn another picture of him. This time, apparently, he was holding something, but they did not describe what. He hoped it was something reasonable. He tried to send a message to the coordinates on the moon, twice. The first time, no response. The second time, the relay bounced back with a short automated note saying the location appeared unoccupied. No structures registered. No heat signatures. Nothing at the coordinates except rock and amber light. He kept the data chip in his jacket pocket. Months passed. The council moved on to other things, the way councils did, the way every institution moved from crisis to crisis without much space between them for reflection. Oren worked. He sat through meetings. He drafted language. He learned the names of new aides and assistants and used them, because names mattered and the small things were sometimes the only things you controlled. At a reception for a newly admitted species, a young diplomat approached him near the edge of the room. She was pale green-skinned, large-eyed, knew enough to Nexara that she still looked at everything with a kind of careful attention. She had heard something, she said. A story. More of a rumor, really. About a human woman who lived somewhere at the edge of space, outside all the maps, and who sometimes appeared when the system had failed the people inside it. She wanted to know if it was true. Oren looked at his drink. He thought about a house on a rocky moon with smoke coming from the chimney. He thought about a woman with strong hands and sharp brown eyes who had listened to him for a long time, and then asked one question that cut straight through everything else. He thought about children who drew yellow suns on worlds that had never seen one, because yellow was the color of something warm and safe borrowed from a place they had never been. He told her that some stories were true and some were useful, and sometimes those were the same story. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes. Then she nodded slowly and turned and walked back into the crowd, carrying whatever she was going to do with that answer. Oren finished his drink. He reached into his jacket pocket and touched the edge of the data chip with 2 fingers, just to confirm it was still there. It was. Somewhere past the rim boundary, past the last marker and the last charted star, the amber light of a dim sun fell on a small rocky moon and lit up nothing at all. Or so the record said.